Welcome back to our channel. Today, we're delving into one of the most pivotal and tragic conflicts in Native American history, the long and bitter struggle between the Apache and Comanche tribes. This conflict was far more than just a territorial dispute. It was a fight for survival, cultural preservation, and, ultimately, the annihilation of one people at the hands of another. Shaped by changing dynamics, new technologies introduced by European colonizers, and the strategic rise of the Comanche as the dominant power on the Great Plains, this war had lasting effects on the American Southwest. In the end, it led to the near destruction of the Apache as a unified military force, forever altering the power structures of the region. At the heart of this story lies the confrontation between two great Native American tribes, but also the broader themes of colonialism, adaptation, and resilience. The Apache and Comanche were not just fighting for territory. They were fighting to preserve their way of life in a world that was rapidly being reshaped by European expansion. While the Comanche emerged victorious in this conflict, it was not a one-sided battle. The story is one of both triumph and defeat, a complex struggle that dramatically shifted the balance of power for both tribes. The Apache. Resilience in the Southwest. The Apache were a diverse group of indigenous peoples inhabiting the southwestern United States, including present-day Arizona, New Mexico, and northern Mexico. They were not a single, monolithic group, but a confederation of culturally and linguistically related bands, each with its own way of life, shaped by the land they inhabited. Some Apache groups were settled agriculturalists, while others, particularly the famous bands, were nomadic hunter-gatherers. Traditionally, Apache society was organized into small, highly mobile units known as bands, led by elder chiefs or warrior leaders. These nomadic groups were skilled in tracking, hunting, and survival. Living in the harsh deserts and rugged mountains, the Apache relied on their intimate knowledge of the land to hunt buffalo, deer, and other game. They also cultivated crops like corn, beans, and squash, especially in areas with fertile soil. The Apache were formidable fighters, known for their lightning-fast raids on enemy settlements. Their mastery of the land, its deserts, mountains, and canyons, was a key component of their defensive strategy. Their ability to use the terrain to their advantage allowed them to stage ambushes, retreat to hidden strongholds, and plan their next move with precision. However, the arrival of European colonizers in the 16th century would forever alter the Apache way of life. The Spanish, followed by the Mexicans and later the Americans, brought new challenges that would test the Apache's resilience. While the Apache had rivalries with other tribes, they were largely able to maintain their independence until European colonization began to encroach on their land. The Spanish encounter and the horse, the first significant encounter between the Apache and Europeans, came in the late 1500s when Spanish explorers pushed into the Southwest. While the Apache were not as severely impacted by diseases like smallpox, unlike many other Native American groups, the introduction of the horse by the Spanish would have a profound effect on Apache society. Spanish conquistadors brought horses to the Americas during their conquests, and these animals would quickly become vital assets to many Native American tribes. The Apache were among the first to acquire horses, and their use of these animals revolutionized their way of life. The horse enabled the Apache to expand their territory, raid more effectively, and strike with greater speed and efficiency. On horseback, the Apache became even more formidable warriors, capable of covering vast distances in short periods and conducting raids with overwhelming force. Horses became a symbol of power for the Apache, allowing them to maintain a degree of autonomy despite increasing colonial pressure on their land. The Comanche, lords of the plains. In contrast to the Apache, the Comanche were a smaller tribe, originally part of the Shoshone people from the Rocky Mountains. Their history, however, would take a dramatic turn with the arrival of horses in the Great Plains. Like the Apache, the Comanche adapted rapidly to the new technology, but their mastery of the horse would elevate them to a position of unparalleled dominance over the southern Great Plains. By the 1700s, the Comanche had become expert horsemen, and their newfound mobility allowed them to transition from a primarily hunting-gathering society to one of the most powerful military forces in the region. The Comanche were no longer simply relying on foot for hunting and survival. They had become masters of mounted warfare. Their agility and speed on horseback allowed them to execute swift raids on enemy tribes and settlements, and they became known for their expert use of horses in combat. Over time, the Comanche expanded their influence over vast territories that included much of present-day Texas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico. They earned the title of Lords of the Plains due to their near-total control over the prairies. The Comanche proved formidable adversaries, successfully defending their territory against both rival tribes and European colonizers. Their hit-and-run tactics, along with their unmatched skills in mounted combat, made them nearly invincible on the plains. Comanche horse culture and military dominance. The Comanche's mastery of horse culture and their innovative military tactics allowed them to control vast territories and forge an empire-like network of alliances and trading relationships. They also gained a monopoly over the horse trade, which granted them immense economic power. Horses became not only a symbol of strength, but a form of currency among the Comanche. The trade in horses enabled them to acquire firearms, ammunition, and other valuable goods from European settlers and traders. Additionally, the Comanche emerged as major players in the fur trade, exchanging animal pelts for European goods and further consolidating their wealth and influence. The clash, Apache versus Comanche. As the Comanche expanded into the southern Great Plains, their growing power inevitably brought them into conflict with the Apache, who had long inhabited the region. The struggle between these two tribes was not just for territory, it was a battle for survival. The Comanche's rise to dominance fundamentally shifted the balance of power across the plains. The Comanche's superior mounted warfare gave them a significant advantage over the Apache, who, though expert in traditional ambush tactics, were still relying on foot soldiers and conventional methods of combat. The Apache were adept at fighting in rugged terrain and were highly skilled in guerrilla warfare. But in the open plains, the speed and mobility of the Comanche cavalry were overwhelming. By the early 1700s, the Comanche began pushing the Apache out of the fertile plains and into the more rugged, mountainous terrain. Despite their fierce resistance, the Apache were gradually pushed back by the Comanche's mounted forces. The Apache's efforts to hold their ground became increasingly futile. In response to the growing threat, the Apache retreated deeper into the deserts and mountains, seeking refuge in more defensible terrain. However, the Comanche were relentless. They did not simply aim to displace the Apache. They sought their complete annihilation. The Comanche launched brutal raids on Apache villages, killing men, women, and children alike. Those who survived were often captured, enslaved, or forced to flee. The Comanche's tactics were designed not only to seize land, but to destroy the Apache as a people. The intensity of these raids marked a turning point in the history of the Apache and sealed the fate of many Apache bands. The role of the Spanish and European intervention. The conflict between the Apache and Comanche was further complicated by European intervention, particularly from the Spanish. The Spanish, who had long been engaged in hostilities with the Apache, saw the rising power of the Comanche as both a threat and an opportunity. As the Spanish expanded their settlements in the southwestern United States, they sought alliances with the Comanche, recognizing the value of the Comanche as military allies against the Apache. The Spanish began supplying the Comanche with firearms, ammunition, and other European goods in exchange for their assistance in defending Spanish settlements in Texas and New Mexico. This alliance drastically shifted the balance of power in favor of the Comanche. The Apache found themselves caught between two powerful forces, the Comanche to the east and the Spanish to the west. Though the Spanish had once been fierce enemies of the Apache, by the mid-1700s, they saw the Comanche as a more reliable and strategic ally. The Spanish provided the Comanche with the resources necessary to wage more effective wars against the Apache, strengthening their military capabilities and further diminishing the Apache's ability to resist. The decimation of the Apache, the alliance between the Spanish and Comanche, played a critical role in the near extermination of the Apache. The Comanche's ability to wage war using both traditional methods and firearms, combined with their dominance on horseback, made them nearly unstoppable. The Apache, on the other hand, struggled to keep up with the new European technologies that were reshaping the battlefield. Their traditional methods of guerrilla warfare, once highly effective, were less suited to combating the cavalry-based tactics of the Comanche. By the mid-1700s, the Apache were in retreat. The constant pressure from the Comanche, alongside the Spanish colonial presence, made it increasingly difficult for the Apache to maintain their way of life. Many Apache bands were destroyed or displaced, with survivors driven into the most inhospitable corners of the American Southwest. The once proud Apache, a confederation of diverse peoples and cultures, were fragmented, their military power broken, and their ability to resist the expansion of European settlers all but gone. The devastation of the Apache in the 18th century was a devastating period for the Apache. As the Comanche intensified their campaign of destruction, the Apache were driven further into the rugged mountainous regions of the Southwest. With each passing year, more Apache families were forced from their ancestral lands, and the once proud tribe found themselves increasingly fragmented and decimated. The loss of their warriors, their land, and their cultural heritage marked the beginning of the end for the Apache as a cohesive and powerful force. By the early 1800s, the Apache were no longer the formidable military power they had once been. The rise of the Comanche as the dominant force on the Great Plains, bolstered by the technological advantages provided by the Spanish and, later, the Americans, ensured that the Apache would never regain their former strength. While some Apache bands managed to survive in isolated pockets, their numbers were dwindling, and their unity was shattered. The once great tribe was no longer the military powerhouse it had been in the past. The Apache had been defeated not just in battle, but in their ability to resist the pressures of both internal division and external colonization. The legacy of the Comanche-Apache War, the Apache-Comanche conflict, had profound consequences, not only for the two tribes, but for the entire history of the American Southwest. The defeat of the Apache and the ascendancy of the Comanche marked the end of an era in Native American history. The Comanche became the undisputed rulers of the Great Plains, and their dominance would shape the region for decades to come. For the Apache, the aftermath of the war was one of profound tragedy and loss. The near extermination of their people, the displacement from their land, and the destruction of their culture had far-reaching effects. The Apache would never regain their former military dominance, and their capacity to resist the encroachment of colonial forces was permanently diminished. The once proud warrior societies were fractured, and their way of life was irreparably altered. The legacy of the Comanche-Apache War serves as a stark reminder of the destructive power of colonization, the resilience of indigenous peoples, and the complex interplay of cultures, warfare, and survival in the face of overwhelming odds. The conflict between these two tribes is not just a tale of war, but a reflection of the changing tides of history and the brutal consequences of the forces that reshaped the American West. Thank you for watching the video until the end. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss any new videos from us. What do you think about today's topic? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found the video helpful, feel free to share it with your friends and family. We hope you had a great time. See you in the next video with even more exciting content. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out.